You okay? Everybody's good? Man, it's so good to see you. And for those of you that are tuning in online, it's great to have you as well. And we're in a series in the book of James. So I want to invite you just right up front to grab your Bibles and turn to the book of James. Or if you look at the Bible app on your phone or a tablet, then go ahead and open that up. Get to the book of James. I think the notes are actually in our app as well. If you want to open up the Cornerstone Church app, and some notes are in there because today's one of those days where we're picking up on a little bit of what we talked about at the very end of last week. And then we're gonna go into these few verses this morning that are gonna be kind of like a gut punch for you. I mean, just a like, oh, I really should be living life just a little bit differently than I'm probably living life right now. So that's kind of what today's gonna be. So thanks for being here. I know you're excited about that, and for watching online, they can actually tune us out if they decide to. If you're here, you're stuck here, we're gonna lock the doors, you can't get out. So one of the things that I do, just by way of confession, I don't know why I do this, but I spend probably a majority of my time scrolling on Facebook at the marketplace. Does anybody else do that? Like, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to stuff that people post, but I spend a lot of time looking at what people are trying to sell, and I don't know why. But one of the things that I really look at is cars. I don't know why I do this, but I think part of it is just I love change in my life, and so it's one of those areas for me that I can look at what other people are trying to sell, and honestly, everything in my life is up for sale except for my wife and kids. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I'll sell you my house, I'll sell you my cars, I'll sell you my furniture if you want it. I mean, like, I'm willing to sell those things so that I can replace them with something new, or newer, or new to me. And so I look at a lot of cars. I don't know why. And I'm always curious if there's a really good bargain or a really good deal. I'm always curious to see where prices are going. I mean, it's amazing to me still that, you can have a car that's 17 years old that sells for, this much money. And I'm sitting there going, man, this is really great for me because I have a couple of really old cars. So that's encouraging. But there's always a little telltale sign if you start reading some of those ads. And it's usually this. Make sure you read the whole post. Like, if that's the first thing that they put on there, then it means there's something that's wrong with the car, which is why it's priced the way that it is. And it doesn't happen very often, but every so often, that's usually something there. And it's usually it's like you would look at it, the car or the truck that someone's trying to sell, and you would go, man, that's a really good deal if you can pick that up for like $3,000. But then you start reading the description and you realize, man, that $3,000 is going to get me a car, but there's no engine in the car. And that doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. I understand people are trying to get rid of some things, but honestly, if your car doesn't have an engine and it's been sitting around in your yard for probably more than a year or two, then probably you just need to find somebody that's willing to take it for scrap and just get rid of it. But they try to sell it for this certain amount of money. But it never makes a whole lot of sense when you think about it, because I don't know if you realize this, but I'm not a mechanic. Are you guys? If you are not a mechanic, just raise your hand. Like, help me feel better about it. I mean, I'm not a mechanic. Like, I've changed the oil in my car a few times way back years ago. I've changed brake pads one time on my car. I've changed an alternator a couple of times because it was a faulty one and I had to replace it. But I mean, I've done a few things, and most of those things are 20 plus years ago. In most recent years, I don't do anything on a car. I'm not a mechanic. So if you're trying to sell a car that doesn't have an engine, or it's the mechanic special, I'm not interested. Because I am one of those people that really believe that a car should have an engine. I'm one of those people who believes that if I'm going to buy a car, that it should have an engine that actually works. It shouldn't be locked up. It shouldn't, like, you're not quite sure what's wrong with it, but you can't get your car to start, but you want me to buy it, kind of thing. Like, I just believe that if I'm going to buy a car, and I believe this for you too, like, I'm for you in this. Like, if you're going to buy a car, you should buy a car that's running. You should buy a car that has an engine. You should buy a car that when you turn the key in the ignition, that it starts up and you can put that bad boy in drive and you can just go when you need to go. Like, that's just what I believe, because a car and an engine go beautifully together. Now, why do I tell you that? Well, I tell you that because the same is true in our life as a Christian. So if you're in this room and you're a follower of Jesus, man, I got a great message in store for you. If you're in this room and you're not a follower of Jesus, you get to sit back and go, hey, see what you guys have to do. Like, this is one of the things one of the reasons I don't want to be a follower of Jesus. I mean, seriously, like, you're going to look at some of this stuff and you're going to go, man, I just never realized that these things go together like a car and an engine. And here they are. Like, these are the two things, and you know this. If you've been a follower of Jesus, you've heard this in the book of James, you've heard it in other places, but there's a relationship that happens in your life as a follower of Jesus between faith and works. It's not necessarily the relationship that you think. Now, some people think that works plays into it and that I am earning my way into a relationship with God, or I am earning my way into heaven, so I have to perform all of these works. But that's actually not what James is talking about. What James is talking about is that there is a relationship between these two things. These two things, this idea of faith and works, go together in the life of a follower of Jesus, just like a car and an engine go together when you're trying to buy a new car. They go together. And so in James chapter 2, we're going to pick up in verse 14. So if you do have your Bibles, turn there, James 2:14. But let me remind you just for a moment, okay? Let me remind you of what James said at the very end of last week. The very end of last week, he talked about this word mercy. Remember, in last week's message, we talked about the favoritism thing. He actually used the word discrimination and how discrimination is actually sin. Not just discrimination based on the color of your skin, but discrimination based upon, the class of people and how you treat wealthy people and poor people. And he ended that little description with this verse. He said, there will be no mercy for those who have not shown mercy to others, which implies that in your life as a follower of Jesus, you should be extending mercy to those around you. But then he says, but if you have been merciful, God will be merciful when he judges you. Now, today, as we pick up in verse 14, it's actually continuing that train of thought. So as last week we were talking about how you treat rich people and poor people as they might come into your midst and the favoritism piece, he's going to break that down just a little bit more and pick up on the merciful piece. And so this is what he says, picking up on verse 14. He says, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith? Think about this. Because some of you, honestly, like, you've grown up in the church. Like, you've been following Jesus for as long as you can remember that you've been following Jesus. You've been, your parents dragged you to church when you were a kid. You sat through all of the Sunday school classes. Like, you won Bible trivia. That's your life. Like, if we were to put those things out there, you'd be like, yeah, that's me. I can do all of those things. But this is what he's getting at. What James is getting at is he's talking to these brothers and sisters, these people who had grown up understanding and knowing the Old Testament. And he says, if you say that you have faith, but you don't show it by your actions. If you say you have faith, can that kind of faith save anyone? And this is where we get it confused. Right? Because he's asking the question this way, this is where we get it confused, because we think, oh, well, this must mean that in my life, the things that I do are giving me, right? They're saving me. I'm saved by the things I do. And that's how a lot of people buy into this relationship with God. And honestly, let's just call it like it is. Like, every other religion in the world operates that way. Every other religion in the world operates this way. The way that James is talking about and the question that he's asking is the way that so many people understand that is, I have to do something in order for God to love me. And they live life trying to earn his love and trying to earn his favor. Can that kind of faith save anyone? But James is going to get a little more specific about what he's talking about. So don't get confused yet. Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye and have a good day. Stay warm and eat well. Right? So basically what he's given us this example. You see someone, a brother or sister, and you see that person is in need. Like they're hungry, They need some clothing. But all you do is basically acknowledge their presence. But you choose to not do anything. You choose to basically give them a greeting, right? Goodbye and have a good day. Stay warm and eat well. But then he goes on, right? But then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Now, don't misunderstand what he's talking about. I'm going to explain this. But unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. Okay? Now here's what James means by this. As a follower of Jesus, your faith should motivate you, and your faith should inspire you. Your faith should move you to action. Like, if all your faith does is keep you from going to hell when you die, then you've completely missed it. You've just completely missed it. And what James is getting at with this is he's going, no. You've got to understand, like, these things go together. It's not just faith, and it's not just works, but these things go together in such a way. So we're going to talk about the difference today in dead faith and growing faith. Dead faith and growing faith, because that's how he described that at the very end. So if you are someone who's taking notes, this is how it's going to pop up. It's like dead faith does this and growing faith does this. And this is the first part of it, is that dead faith talks, but growing faith walks. And you probably understand what I mean by this, because you know people in your life, right? They are full of hot air. Right? Now, I'm not going to mention any names, and you might be looking at that person that's sitting right next to you right now and go, that's kind of you. He's talking about you right now. But that's part of it, isn't it? Like, part of it is, like, we know that there are people who talk a good talk. Like, they talk a good game, but they don't walk out what it is that they say they believe. They talk about it, but they don't walk this thing out. The things that James is talking about, the things that John talks about in 1 John. Like, there's no walking it out in their life. They're just simply talking about it. I mean, think of it, like people that talk a good game, the people that basically are sitting on the sidelines, and they might even cheer other people on, but they're not actually getting in the game. They're actually not walking all of the things that they know, all the things that they've been taught, all the things that they know and believe about Jesus, all the things that might stir their heart's affections, and you might go, yay, Jesus! But you don't want to be someone that walks it out. You know people that are like that. But James is getting to this place where he's going, no. You see, dead faith is full of people who just talk about it. But growing faith is full of people that are walking out the things that they say they believe. And there is just a huge difference between those groups of people. And I would imagine, if you really lean into what James is saying with this, that there are areas of your life, that there are areas of your faith that you are really good at talking about, but you're really bad at walking it out. You're really good at sitting. You can sit around a table where it's safe, and you can talk about, and you can even judge people based upon that conversation. But when it comes to walking this out, when it comes to actually saying that I'm going to love the least of these, when it comes to living out the fact that we know, and we all know this, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to say, like, I know that Jesus came to seek and to save lost people. I know that, but I'm not going to walk that out in my life. Jesus came to be served. or not to be served, but to serve. And you're sitting there going, that's really great, isn't it? Like, yay, Jesus, he didn't come to be served, but he came to serve everybody else. But then it comes to walking that out. And how am I going to do that in my life? Or here's one that's going to be quite challenging during this season of our life, is how do we get to this place where we can stop just talking about how much Jesus and God the Father loves the world, and instead we can actually just walk this out in the way that we interact with people who don't talk like us, look like us, act like us, or believe like us, or are not in the same political party as us. Oops. But see, that's what happens when we say, I am going to walk this out in the way that Jesus walked this out in his life. I'm not going to be someone who is going to be filled with empty talk and empty promise. I remember years and years ago, my wife and I, we're having some problems, because that's what marriage does, right? So marriage brings out the best in you by exposing you. Did you know that? Right. So some of you are like, yeah. Some of you are like, no, I don't want to admit it. But I remember like this conversation with my wife. And she basically confronts me with a very difficult truth. And we'd only been married probably for 4 years or something like that. I mean, this seems like a long time ago. But I remember her saying, basically in your life, that you need to be a man of your word. And what she was getting at was, it's not okay just to talk about it. It's not okay to like get in your religious circles and small groups and just talk like you are this person that everybody might even think that you are. But what she was getting at for me in my life is like, there comes a point where you have to decide that you're going to walk out the things that you know and the things that you say you believe, so that your life and your faith are not just words, but they're marked by action. And that's what James is getting at. Let's go on. He says this, James 2, picking up in verse 18. He says this, now someone may argue, some people have faith and others have good deeds, that these things should be separate. That's basically what he's saying. There are some people who are going to argue that. But I say, and this is where James gets to, he says, but I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have good deeds? I'll show you my faith by good deeds. You see what he's getting at? Like the relationship, the car and the engine, the faith and the works, the faith and the deeds. Like, I'm going to demonstrate to you what I believe by the way that I live my life, by the way that I interact with other people, by the good works and the good fruit that's coming out of my life. They are going to reveal to you the faith that I have in Jesus Christ. My works are not in place of my faith, but my works are a demonstration of my faith. He says this, you say you have faith, for you believe that there is one God, and that's good for you. Now, let me just be honest. Like, I've been in a lot of conversations with a lot of people through the years, and they're like, well, you know what? I believe in God. Well, guess what? Even the demons believe this, and they tremble in terror. How foolish. Can't you see that faith without good deeds is useless? Faith without good deeds is useless. And that's a hard truth. It's a hard truth. There's a lot of people who have this intellectual knowledge just like the demons did. But there's no transformation. And so if you're someone who writes notes, you're going to write this down. It's this. Dead faith knows, but growing faith goes. Dead faith knows. In fact, dead faith, remember when we were talking about the previous people that just like to talk about it? Well, you know, dead faith, if you're someone who has dead faith, you are someone that probably likes to sit around a table and talk and hash these things out with other people. I honestly, I'll be real honest, I used to be one of those people. I love to sit around and talk theology and doctrine and all of those types of things. I would rather do that than do a lot of other things 25 years ago in my life. But what I'm realizing is as I grow, I can't just sit around and talk about the things that I know. At some point, I have to put feet to my faith, and so do you. So dead faith knows, but growing faith goes. And it's like, this is what it looks like in the life of a follower of Jesus, or this is what it should look like, right? So growing faith engages, and there's three things. Think about it this way. Growing faith engages three things. It's real simple. Growing faith engages the head first. So yeah, that's the knowledge piece. But somewhere along the line, it's like the things that we know, in fact, it's probably some of the difference, and this is going to hurt just a little bit, so go ahead and stick your toes out so I can just stomp on them real quick. But it's part of the difference between people that just sort of sit here and they're not really singing, but they're just looking at the words, is that it's just simply this head thing. Because there comes a point in the life of a follower of Jesus, and again, I know that that's frustrating for you, but it's going to move from your head to your heart. It's going to move into this passion and this zeal that you would have for Jesus. Like the way that I would describe it to some people is that your heart and your affections are stirred towards Him. I mean, just think about it. Like if you are married in the room, I mean, just think about the when you used to just sit and talk to your spouse and you were getting to know them. And then somewhere along the way, like your heart, every time that you were around them, like your heart was beating just a little bit faster, wasn't it? It's like, oh, I just can't wait to sit and talk to them. I just want to get to know. And that's moving you from your head to your heart. And your affections get stirred towards someone. And as a follower of Jesus, like as growing faith is engaging your head and you get to know Him more, like it's going to move to your heart where your affections are going to be stirred towards Him. And then the last thing is that it's head, heart, and hands. It's somewhere along the way, and basically that's just a demonstration to say it's going to go out. Like I'm going to want to serve the Lord Jesus Christ based upon my faith in Him, based upon my knowledge of Him that's moved into my heart, and now it wants to move through my hands in the way that I interact and love and serve people. That's what should be happening in the life of everyone who calls themselves a follower of Jesus. Your faith should be growing in such a way that it's moving through your head, your heart, and your hands in the way that you serve other people. Why? Because dead faith knows, but growing faith goes. Growing faith isn't going to just talk about it. Growing faith is going to get going and perform good works. And it's going to produce good fruit in the life of someone who is following Jesus. And James, as he was saying in this particular piece, James is going, hey, you can't tell me that faith and works don't go together. Because I will tell you that if you are someone who truly follows Jesus and someone who has growing faith, then you are going to show people, you are going to demonstrate your faith by the works that you produce. And now he's going to give us a couple of examples. Ready? He's going to go reach all the way back. Remember his audience. His audience, his first generation followers of Jesus who have a Jewish heritage. And so he's reaching all the way back into the Old Testament. He's reaching all the way back to this guy, his name's Abraham, and then he's going to reach all the way back to when they were just about to enter the Promised Land. And he says this, don't you remember that our ancestor Abraham was shown to be right with God by his actions when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? Now, if you're not familiar with this particular story, you can go to the book of Genesis, and around chapter probably 20-ish or so is where you're going to start getting into this story. But basically, and I know it's one of those hard things, like I don't understand how a loving God could do this, but He did. He asked Abraham to offer his one and only son as a sacrifice. And so Abraham did exactly what God told him to do. And they walked up the mountain, and he gets his son on the altar, and he is about to offer him as a sacrifice, and God moves in his behalf. He sees a ram caught in the thicket, all that kind of stuff. So he didn't actually follow through with it, but he was willing to. Don't you remember? Oh, I'm sorry, go on. He offered his son. You see, his faith, here it is, his faith and his actions worked together. His actions made his faith complete. So basically what he's getting at in all of this is like, if Abraham had just talked about it, but he hadn't acted on it, then something was missing. It was incomplete. But he's really getting to this place of helping him understand, or helping us understand, like, hey, at some point in your life, your faith needs to move you to action. It can't be something that you just simply talk about. It can't be something that you just simply do on Sunday mornings. It can't be something that you simply just check off the box. Your heart needs to be stirred in your affections towards Jesus, and then it should cause you and cause your feet to move and serve and love and produce good works and good fruit in your life. If it doesn't, then it's incomplete. It's incomplete. And so as you get into your life and you begin to examine, right? Examine your life and examine your faith. Like, those are some of the decisions that you're going to have to make, is how in my life am I putting feet to my faith? How in my life is my faith producing fruit? And not just fruit in terms of, hey, you know what, fruit of the Spirit, but even beyond that, fruit in the way that you serve and love people, especially those who aren't like you. That's what James is getting at. So he goes on, talks about incomplete faith. He says, and so it happened, just as the scripture says, Abraham believed God, and God counted him as righteous because of his faith. He was even called a friend of God. So you see, this is where he keeps going. So you see, because he's got another example that he's going to give us. We are shown to be right with God. It is a demonstration of being right with God by what we do. You know, when you begin to serve people and someone finally begins to ask you that question, well, why in the world are you doing this? And that opens that door. It opens the door to say, you know, it's funny you ask that, because that wouldn't necessarily be my natural response. But you know, can I just tell you about what Jesus has done for me? And that is what inspires me, and that is what motivates me to serve and love and do the things that I do. And it all just gets tied back to Jesus. Heard a great story this week of someone in our church, and that's exactly what happened. They're in a conversation with someone, and they look at them and go, you're just so nice. I'm amazed that you would help me so much by giving me a ride to this place and that place. And I'm just amazed by that. And the person responds and says, yeah, it's not really me. Because if it were just me, like, I wouldn't have ever done this, because I would rather just be all by myself. But see, Jesus in me makes all of the difference. And you see, that should be true of every one of us in our life, that Jesus in you makes all of the difference. That Jesus in you is producing works. That Jesus in you is making your faith visible so that others can see it, not by faith alone, right? So he goes on. He's going to give us this second example, right? Rahab, the prostitute, is another example. She was shown to be right with God by her actions when she hid those messengers and sent them safely away by a different road. So in the story of Rahab, if you're not familiar with the Old Testament, the Israelites were just about to enter to this place called the Promised Land that God had set aside for them. But in order to do that, they would have to conquer all of these cities. The very first city that they needed to conquer was a place called Jericho, which had walls built around it. And so Joshua sent 2 spies into Jericho, and Rahab is the one who hid them in her house on the wall. She hid them, and the people find out that these spies had come, and they go to Rahab and they say, hey, where are these guys? And she had taken them up to the roof and she had hid them, but she says, hey, they're not here anymore, that they left and they went out this way in this direction. And she basically then goes up to the spies and tells them to go off in this direction and to hide in the hills for 3 days. There's fruit. There's actions that are demonstrated. Her faith is demonstrated by her actions. Just as the body, she goes on, just as the body is dead without breath, or if you want to use the car and the engine, so also faith is dead without good works. Faith is dead without good works. If your faith is not producing good works in your life, then it's dead. It's dead. Dead faith, this is the way that I would say, dead faith is paralyzed, but growing faith is mobilized. Dead faith is paralyzed. And some of you are living life that way. Like when I say paralyzed, I mean, think about it. Like you get paralysis by analysis. Like you're waiting for the exact perfect opportunity. And so you're just going to sit back until that exact perfect opportunity presents itself. And you've waited for 35 years and you're still waiting. Why? Because you're paralyzed. And listen, can I just tell you, like, there's never going to be the perfect opportunity to just go love people. Just go out and serve people. Just go out and live the way that Jesus lived. Just go out and interact with people the way that Jesus interacted with people. Just go out and love people the way that Jesus loved people. Like, it's just really that simple. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need to overanalyze it. You just need to mobilize your faith. You just need to put feet to your faith and go out and serve and love people. And that's what James is getting at. He started out these verses today, right? If you see someone that is hungry and basically naked, and all you do is give them a blessing and send them on their way, then you are missing out on the opportunity that is right in front of you. And some of you have people in your life who are sitting there and they're hungry and they're naked and they're just waiting for you to offer them some clothing and some food. And all you do is just bless them and you go on your way. And Jesus is inviting you in this moment to say, no, 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 no. Like your faith should mobilize you to do something. And if it doesn't, then it's not growing faith. In fact, James would even wonder if you really have true faith or authentic faith or genuine faith at all. Because dead faith is paralyzed, but growing faith is mobilized. 1 John, if you have a Bible, you might want to turn there real quick. 1 John is a book that's just filled with a lot of jabs. I'm just going to be real honest. Like if you start reading 1 John, I mean, just be ready because he's just going to start just hitting you with all sorts of things. And basically, he's getting to this place in 1 John of trying to help people understand, like at some point, your life should really begin to mirror the faith that you say that you have. That's really what 1 John's getting at. But he says this in 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 to 18. So if you're looking it up or you just want to jot that address down, he says this. We know, for those of us who follow Jesus, we know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. Now, maybe you just need to be reminded of that. Jesus gave up his life for you. See, it seems like something that a lot of us know, but it hasn't really taken root in our heart. But Jesus gave up his life for you. Jesus hung on a cross for you. Jesus decided that he was willing to take your place. And that's what John's writing about. We know, for those of us who call ourselves Christians, we know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life. So we also, this is where it gets to, so we also, follower of Jesus, fellow follower of Jesus, we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. And to that we all go, yes, but you don't know their This is where we all begin to make some kind of excuse. I know, because I do the same thing in my own life. But he's going to illustrate it for us, because he knows a lot of us really, really need as much help as possible. If someone has enough money to live well, and that's everybody in this room. I know you may not think it is, but I remind you that if you make more than $34,000 annually, then you are among the top wage earners in the world. So if you have enough money to live well and you see a brother or sister, if all it does is start in the church, but if you see a brother or sister in need, if they are standing before you and they need some clothing and they need some food, but you decide to show no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? I told you, he's just going to start just giving you some jabs in the book of 1 John. How in the world, if you in your life know and you believe and you applaud and you embrace the fact that Jesus gave up his life for you, but it hasn't moved you to help other people and it hasn't moved you to be merciful to other people, then how can God's love be in you? Because if God's love is in you, it should be flowing out from you. Dear children, let us not merely say that we love each other, but let us show this truth by our actions. That our life, our actions, would be a demonstration of this faith that we say that we have. What does it look like? Well, I mean, things we've talked about last week, you could repeat them, but think about it this way. Just look for opportunities to show compassion. What James is talking about is, hey, if you see someone that's in need, then go out and meet that need. If you see someone who needs help, go help that person. That it's just that simple. It's kind of like the way that I've said it in the past, and the way that I would remind us is like it's literally learning to live with your eyes open. That you are paying attention to what's going on around you enough to say, I can step into this moment in someone's life and I can make a difference. Not to pat myself on the back, but to demonstrate God's love being in me and flowing through me. Get out of your comfort zone. Right? We all like our comfort zone. We love the air conditioning or the heat if it's cold. It feels like winter today. To me, it does anyway. We like our padded seats or our leather seats or our nice recliner at home. But let's just begin to step out of that comfort zone just a little bit. And then do it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And just watch what God does as you decide to do that. And then really the last thing I'd say is that find someone. Find someone that's in need or find someone that needs help, and you just step in to their world. And as the Father has loved me, so you will love them. That's what it means for the love of Jesus to be in you. Is for it to flow through you into the life of someone else. Listen, I just want to close. We're gonna sing a couple really great songs as we end our time, and I think the last one is called "Christ Be Magnified." And there's a line in there that talked about how that we'll be crucified with him. And there's this verse that I was thinking about this week. I had just a few moments earlier this week, about 30 minutes, where I was in an uncomfortable situation, but I couldn't do anything. I was actually immobilized, and I had to sit in an MRI machine. Have you ever had to sit in an MRI machine? And I hate those things. And so part of the way that I conquer that is I just start trying to recite verses. And this is the one that I kept reciting. For I am crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. In the life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. And that's part of what you're going to sing in this last song. And my prayer as we sing today, listen, if you need prayer, if you want somebody to talk to, hey, if you even want to know more about what it means to follow Jesus, we'll have one of our pastors that's just hanging out in the back in this room. And please, during these songs, feel free to go and talk to them. But here's what my prayer is for those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, is that as we sing, that it's moving from our head to our hearts, and our affections are going to be stirred, and it's going to move us this week to go out with our hands and to serve and love people the way that we are called to, so that the love of God is not just in us, but it's flowing through us. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you are patient and kind and long-suffering. Thank you that, Lord, so often, so many times, I know the times that I have failed and failed and failed, but God, you are continuing to be patient towards me. And I thank you for that. I thank you that you sent Jesus to die for me. And Lord, there are so many ways that I need to walk this out, and I'm reluctant to do it. So God, give me boldness. Give us as a church boldness and passion and heart and just motivation to get up out of our comfort zones and to go and serve and love people who aren't like us. Because that's exactly what Jesus did for us. And it's in his beautiful, matchless name we pray. Amen. Let's all stand up. We're going to sing these couple songs together.